All right, if you're tuning in for this assignment, then you should have the data analysis mixed practice in front of you. And these videos are to offer help, not the answers, for the problems that you are going to be asked to solve today. So when we look at this first problem, it says the graph below represents the distances the fifth grade students at Pope Elementary ran in Mr. King's and Mrs. James' class during the 4 different months. And so this, remember, every story tells us a graph. Every graph tells us a story. I'm so sorry. Every graph tells us a story. So this particular story is about Pope 5th grade runners. And what I'm noticing is that I have the months listed on the y-axis over here on the side, starting with December, November, October, and September. On the x-axis, it looks like we have the distance run, and this would be in miles. And then we have the shading, the light shading representing Mrs. James, and the dark shading representing Mr. King. So before I even get started, I do notice that there are some lighter markings in between the actual numbers. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to mark those first. So when I think about a number that could be between 0 and 60, I think about the number 30. So it looks to me like the intervals in between the numbers are 30 more than the previous number. So that means if I'm at 60 and I go 30 more, that would be 70, 80, 90. So this interval would be marked 90. And 30 more would be 100, 110, 120. So yes, that's matching up perfectly. 30 more than 120 would be 130, 140, 150. So I'm going to mark that here, 150. And then we have 180, and 30 more than that would be 190, 200, 210. So I'm going to mark that interval here. 220, 230, 240, still matching up perfectly. 250, 260, 270 would be the marking here. And then 280, 290, 300. So just checking my math as I go along. Now what I advise that you do is you go through and you mark the different amounts. So it looks like for Ms. James in the month of September, they ran 210, while Mr. King ran 240. Ms. James again in October was running 180. While Mr. King was running 210. Looks like Miss James' class finally pulled ahead in November with a 240-mile mark, while Mr. King only pulled in 180. And then in December, it looks like we have 270, and then Mr. King has 210. So now that we have our table completely marked up, it's time for us to go and look at problem number 1. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. All right. What is the difference between the number of miles that Mr. King's class ran in September and in December? So the first thing I'm thinking about is, what is the difference? So I'm going to go ahead and box in this word, because anytime I think about the difference, I need to think about the word, or about subtracting. So I'm going to be subtracting 2 amounts. It looks like I'm going to be subtracting between the number of miles Mr. King's class ran in September and then again in December. So Mr. King is the darker marking, and so in September they ran 240, while in December they ran 210. So that's where I'm going to leave you. You're going to need to find that difference.